I'd like to welcome to the stage Stuart Allen, CEO of FusionX, for a conversation with Greg Piefer, founder and CEO of Shine Technologies. Welcome.
Great to have you. I want to acknowledge that you are an FusionX OG. You attended our very first meeting, which was only, 3 years ago? Seems like a lifetime. Fusion's moved on so much in the interim. Shine then was already on its way with a well-established pathway, the 4 steps to fusion power. And now you're a company with a proven foundation, consistent vision, and a plan that is very much in train evolving. The model's well known, stage industrialization pathway. Each business line funds, enables, provides learning for the next. So if you give us a feel for where you're at and what the balance is between revenue generation, learning, enhanced access to funding, and the progress towards fusion energy.
Yeah, awesome. And so I think some of you know about Shine. Those of you who don't, we're here for the same reason everybody else is here. Like, we want to change the way humans make energy, and we've built our company to do that in what we think is the fastest way possible and the most scalable way possible. We've got great engineers, great scientists, lots of patents. But fundamentally, I think the thing that differentiates Shine from a lot of other companies is a business innovation. And we've really taken the approach of how do we build scale over time in the commercial space versus trying to go from nascent to full scale, like power delivery. And a lot of this it's just a quick origin story here. So I got a PhD in nuclear engineering from the University of Wisconsin, and we were an engineering group that looked primarily at what the engineering challenges were with fusion reactors. So assume that we could make the science work. What would be the fundamental limit to actually getting these things in the field? And to me, it looked like a really hard problem at least 20 years ago. I really couldn't see my way to financial markets and others having enough patience to do it. Some of that's changed for the better now, but I think fundamentally the challenge and the height of the hurdle is still the same. But I had 2 other really formative experiences. One was I had an advisor that essentially said, there's other things you can do with fusion other than make heat. And so there were other applications that were worth thinking about. And I had another experience where I started a data recovery company randomly because I had a roommate that had a hard drive crash. And we looked online, and the business solutions were terrible. You had to pay people $2,000, and maybe they'd get your stuff back. And that was it. That was your only option. And we thought that was a market that was ripe for disruption. So we started our own data recovery company. And our model was simple. If we get your stuff, you pay us. And we were terrible at it. We were actually really bad at it. We were good with computers, bad with fixing hard drives. But within 5 years, the FBI was sending their stuff to us. So I got to the point, I got a firsthand view of how quickly a company can improve when executing commercial practice. And so I really started Shine to combine these 2 ideas, which are maybe there are near-term things we can do with fusion that would allow us to practice. And through practicing, drive costs down through scale. And we've been at it ever since, frankly. And the way we kind of looked at it was, it's easy to get distracted, to your point. Like, how do you stay focused on the prize? And so we really had 3 guiding filters. When we looked at different markets and different things we could do with fusion, the 3 filters that needed to be satisfied for us to pursue it were, number 1, the practicing in these markets had to move us toward fusion energy. They had to make us better in ways that would reduce the cost or make fusion more deployable through practice. The second major filter for us to look at any market was, is it an important market? And this is a simple thing we call TAM. And the TAM had to scale as our business scaled. So the world measures importance fundamentally through economic means. And so the TAM had to make sense given the scaling profile of the business. And then finally, fusion had to have a right to win in the markets we were in. In other words, it had to have significant advantages over the incumbent producers in these markets. And so we did that, and it's really, those 3 filters are where these product lines came out of. The things that we talk about, which is starting with test and then scaling through medical, ultimately recycling and clean energy generation. And then we force ranked those products not by TAM, but by unit economics. So we said, which customers will pay the most? And fundamentally, just started with those. And it turned out test customers would pay far more than people who wanted heat from fusion reactions. So we have a machine today that is at work at GE, and it scans every single fuel rod they manufacture. It's a fusion system. And they pay about $1 million a kilowatt hour for the output from that system. $1 million a kilowatt hour. That's way better than 10 cents, right? Like that's where we need to be for energy. And other test clients are willing to pay, $100,000 a kilowatt hour for the output from these systems. So we started there, we practiced, and then eventually improved the technology to the point where we could use it to transmute. So we could use the neutrons from fusion to change materials from low-value forms to high-value forms. And we've now built the most substantial infrastructure the world's ever seen for using that transmutation capability to produce medical radioisotopes, something we call Chrysalis. And so that is being deployed. And Chrysalis will be the largest medical radioisotope production facility in the world. It will use fusion instead of fission as the primary means of driving these reactions. And it will actually be the first net energy positive fusion system in the world. And it will be operating in a continuous form, not 10 seconds at a time, but 24/7. Now, we're not going to capture the energy. It's not economically relevant at Chrysalis scale, about a megawatt of thermal output. But it proves a point. And economically, Chrysalis is relevant because the unit economics for medical isotopes are about $100 a kilowatt hour. So about 1,000 times better than energy. So Chrysalis will have gigawatt scale revenue. It'll have proven the point that we can make more energy out than we put in. And it's the right stepping stone for us to kind of move into the next product line, which for us is recycling. So that's kind of where we're at.
So when you had the initial vision of this stage pathway, and now you're a fair ways along it, how's that altered as you've gone through that process of iterating, learning, understanding the market, realizing the value, the enhanced value of selling these different projects rather than energy?
Yeah, I mean, so making a business is really hard, first of all, and so that's much harder than I actually ever thought it would be. I wanted to be a technology developer at the beginning, and it turns out to build a company, you need to be really good at a lot of things. You need to be good at pleasing customers and selling products and marketing things and building things and maintaining them in the field and all that. So number one, it's been really hard, but number two, I've actually been completely shocked by the rate of learning. Like because we can build products pretty quickly in these markets, we can iterate very quickly and we can learn really, really quickly. And maybe I don't know if this is a good time to bring up the learning curve slide. But let me just show you, like this is one of the coolest things I've ever seen, and I didn't expect it to look this cool. So if we could bring up, and I'm actually gonna jump to this slide, and ignore the computer side of this. There's a chart on the left of this that's basically the economics of Moore's law. But on the right side, you have demonstrated rate of learning. Look at the part of the line that's blue and the dots that are blue. This is literally the amount of fusion per second, or reactions per second we can get out of a system per dollar. This is how much it costs us to build a system. And if you look from our first generation products to our current, which is what Chrysalis is sort of the state of the art in fusion commercialization today, you've seen about a factor of 10,000, maybe a little bit more, improvement in the unit economics of fusion just by practicing. We're practicing in commercial markets. And so this is incredibly compelling. And nobody has a crystal ball, nobody can tell the future, but if you just extrapolate that curve forward, you actually get to the point where you're putting pure fusion energy on the grid in the 2040s. Cost competitively. And one of the coolest things about fusion is, like, if we can keep up this rate of learning, and the rate of learning is you have to have many different products you're iterating on, because it's actually it's a long cycle to build power plants. But if we can keep up this rate of learning, fusion actually will eventually be much cheaper than any other form of energy generation. And I think that's the thing that we're all here for.
And this is a great corrective to that paper that was recently published that suggested the rate of learning in fusion would be such that fusion would struggle to be competitive, because this is an astonishingly faster rate of learning than that paper suggested.
It's not a few percent per year. Yeah. This is actually, and so this was so fast, and I was so surprised by the data, I wanted to compare it to chips. And so I put chips on this chart on the left just so we can see it. The cost of compute has come down 100 million times since 1990, over 1 trillion times since 1970. And rapid iteration and having a strong market pull are what enabled this. Fundamentally, at the end of the day, advanced fusion systems and chips will not be raw material limited in terms of their cost. Chips use silicon. Ultimately, I believe fusion will use deuterium as its primary raw material. And there's enough deuterium, I think everyone knows, enough deuterium in the ocean to run the world at its current energy generation rates for about 30 billion years. And so, as we look at the raw materials, that won't be a cost limiter as fusion systems get more sophisticated and cheaper. And the other thing that really enabled chips to do this were higher energy lithography systems. So fundamentally, lithography went to shorter and shorter wavelength, higher and higher energy, and more control. And these are the same things that are going to continue to march fusion all the way onto the path of what I believe will be a pure deuterium economy, is getting to temperatures eventually within the tens of keV where we don't even need to burn deuterium tritium anymore. Do believe the first generation reactors will be deuterium tritium. But so fundamentally, these are different technologies, but there are some similarities which suggest maybe they should do what we're seeing, and that's very encouraging.
So, I mean, it's driven by, you said, iterating smaller, almost modules of what will ultimately be a power plant, rather than having to build an entire first of a kind, learn by that, but obviously learn through the O&M cycle and so forth. It allows for far more rapid, constant learning.
Yeah, rapid learning, I think, is the first thing, but I think also what's really interesting is like very commercial learning. So our systems are completely driven by commercial principles. Like we think in terms of dollars per kilowatt hour. You have reactions per second per dollar. That's a proxy for basically dollars per kilowatt hour. And when that is your North Star, you just make different design choices. And so I think the combination of the two is what drove Moore's Law. I think the combination of the two is what's driven the progress here, is not just that we can iterate quickly, but that fundamental economic principles drive every design decision we make.
So you raised $240 million recently from a very diverse suite of investors covering, biotech, healthcare, energy infrastructure, industrial capital. So what's the narrative that you're selling, and what are those investors buying into now, given the myriad businesses and opportunities that you're engaging with?
Yeah, so the end game narrative is this: we're going to increase human access to energy in a way that you can't even possibly imagine how it's going to change the world. And just like the cost of compute going down resulted in innovations that are now changing the world as we think about AI, I think the cost of energy going down will do the same. By the way, I don't think this ever results in energy that's too cheap to meter. I think that's a ridiculous notion. I think what this will result in is massive increases in the amount of energy we consume. And I think you're going to see the total addressable market grow as energy becomes cheaper, as the unit economics go down. And so, fundamentally, that's the game that people like to bet on for fusion. But what we're sort of where the Shine story differs a little bit, and I don't know if I can go backwards, is, this slide, and you guys have seen, some of you have been at these, have seen this slide before, but this is the relationship between unit economics and TAM that you can access with fusion. And the pink line here is basically the cost of fusion in terms of dollars per kilowatt hour, and you can access subsequently larger TAMs as you move down this curve. And investors love the proof, right? So you see where the nucleus is on this. We're already there. I mean, Chrysalis will be about $20 a kilowatt hour at scale, when you think about what that facility is able to do. So we started with systems that were $1 million, right? Like it's still in service, right? People are paying $1 million a kilowatt hour. Chrysalis will be $20, and that's a facility that's coming online in the next, call it 18 months. I think people like the end game, but I think they like the execution as well. And they like what we've been able to do, and they would like the fact that we've been able to march along this curve. And then there's real proof points that they can measure. Because most investors, aside from people in this room who are incredibly smart and largely understand fusion, most investors don't. They don't understand fusion at all. But if you show them the march down the unit economics curve and you show them a growing revenue and earnings profile, these are things they like to see. And so they actually know how to measure this company, and I think that's one of the things that's driving investor enthusiasm for Shine.
So, I mean, the medical isotopes, the nuclear infrastructure business, all of these things, I mean, if you look at the press releases coming out of Shine, your successes in these, you're rightly making headlines with those. But the long-term goal, as we can see from this chart, has been the generation of energy. And you now have a vision of how you're going to do that. And Chrysalis is, the learning from Chrysalis is catalytic to that. So could you outline that to us?
Yeah, and it's been consistent all the way through. So as you look at these unit economics and the type of system that allowed you to penetrate the market, like in test, the system I mentioned that GE uses is milliwatt-scale output, like milliwatts of fusion power. And it's that valuable to them that it's interesting. Our first, our state-of-the-art in sort of neutron radiography systems today are watt-scale systems. We've progressed up to sort of kilowatt-class systems now that we use for rad effects testing, which is sort of where our current state-of-the-art is. Chrysalis will push that into megawatt-scale output. Each one of these was enabled by a significant advance in technology. And it's a wide range of different innovations. And again, this is what comes when you're pushing commercial all the time, right? Like you're not focused on a single innovation, you're not focused on a single aspect. It's how do I take that next step the fastest and the most cost effectively and get it out there? And and so, as we look at each one of those, there was an innovation under it. The innovation for Chrysalis is hybrid technology. So Chrysalis will take our kilowatt class fusion systems and pair them with a multiplying fission blanket. Now we do this for two reasons. Number one, the isotopes we care about come from uranium fission. So the target tree is going to be there already, where you want uranium to be there. Second, the aqueous nature of the target makes it inherently difficult to control. Versus like a fission reactor where you might want to just use control rods to do it. Fusion gives you controllability in these systems you wouldn't otherwise have. So from the standpoint of the product and from the standpoint of actually commercializing, fusion makes a ton of sense. But the hybrid tech allows you to get significant energy multiplication that you wouldn't otherwise have. So kilowatt class fusion driving megawatt class output comes from the fact that we'll drive about 70 fission reactions for every fusion reaction that happens in Chrysalis. So it's a highly multiplying but subcritical target. And then every fission reaction produces about 200 MeV per reaction, which is about 11 times more energy output per reaction than a DT reaction has. So if you look at an energy amplification standpoint, it's about a factor of 800 energy amplification in Chrysalis. And that's all through the NRC, that's all licensed, and it's almost done being built, right? And so through that energy multiplication, we will see, like I said, the first net energy fusion technology systems through hybrid technology in the next 2 years. And they will run continuously producing products all the time. As we look at where we're going next, which is recycling, there's a vast similarity between using fusion to produce radioisotopes and cause that fundamental transmutation that makes things valuable, and what we'll be doing for recycling. Recycling is a bunch of chemistry up front. You separate uranium and plutonium from spent fuel, you recycle that, you put that into new rods. It's a responsible thing to do. Rids the world of plutonium, which is kind of a bad thing to have building up. And then you separate other radioisotopes. But fundamentally, you're still left with this long-lived waste that you can't do much with. And it lives for millions of years, and you can't really dispose of it. You can actually put that in a similar highly multiplying configuration. You probably can't run it at critical. There's not enough delayed neutrons in transuranic. There's significantly fewer delayed neutrons in plutonium. But you can do exactly what we did in Chrysalis, which is use a fusion system to stabilize it. And so as we look at going to the next class system, that's basically brute forcing our way into megawatt-scale fusion output with gigawatt-scale thermal output. And so we're not only going to transmute these long-lived isotopes into short-lived isotopes, we're going to use the same principle that's already been approved in Chrysalis and will be demonstrated in Chrysalis in the next 2 years to create energy gain at gigawatt scale. And we actually intend to sell the heat and the energy we produce in these highly multiplying waste burners. And so that'll give us practice. At the megawatt scale fusion, gigawatt scale output, so economics of gigawatt scale, but fusion on the grid, right? Like these fusion systems will have to be reliable as if they were producing electricity on their own, and they will allow us to continue to practice and scale. From there, we need about a factor of 4 to go to burning plasma temperatures. And from there, about another factor of 4 ultimately to go from DT to DD fusion systems, which is where we think the long game ends up.
Give us a broad feel for the timeline for that. The long game is, how long is the long game?
Yeah, I think so you look at electricity on the grid from these hybrid systems, we're pretty comfortable with mid-2030s as a timeline for that. So again, we've got tremendous experience designing, regulating, building these sort of facilities in Chrysalis, and so feel really grounded in that. Getting to megawatt scale reliable fusion systems is a lift. I'm not gonna lie, right? Like it's a step back from what's been demonstrated, I think, in the state of the art. But having that 24/7 reliable, that's going to be a lift, and I think that's probably going to be the governing factor rather than the fission blanket and everything else we want to do. As we look beyond that, I'm relying primarily on this as my crystal ball, in terms of getting back to commercial fusion energy. So our plans have us deploying the first DT plant, standalone plant, in sort of the 2043 timeframe right now, but I'd put that as highly variable.
So just to clarify, is fusion energy gain meaningful less than Q greater than 1? I mean, only Q significantly less than 1 is amplified by fission reactions in a blanket that's using fissionable waste material and is transmuting and processing that at the same time.
Yeah, and the beauty of that approach is it's not just like you're not using them. Your primary economic model isn't the electricity. You're still getting paid, like the amount you're getting paid for the recycling service. And the other things is over $1 a kilowatt hour still. And so the commercial product, the vast majority of the commercial value isn't actually in the energy. The reason we're doing the energy is is not even for the extra 10 or 20 cents you might get. It's for the practice. Right? We want to capture the energy so we're actually practicing fusion in an energy relevant environment and can actually use that to drive it forward. Now the extra 10 to 20 cents is nice because the heat source is already there. And you just have to capture it and turn it into electricity. So why wouldn't you do that, and why wouldn't you sell it? But I think it's an incredibly good way to practice and continue to drive the tech forward that way.
Great. We have a few minutes left, so questions from the audience for Greg on any of the points he's been making. Ladies, gentlemen.
The question over there.
One over here.
Hi, super cool talk, obviously. I'm curious about the revenue model for recycling and whether the waste is whether the producers of the waste are paying for it or whether you're recycling extra materials from it. Just curious to hear a bit more there.
Yes, there's 4 revenue streams from recycling. It's a pretty exciting business. There's a service fee we expect to get paid, and I think long term where that comes from is TBD, but it could be ultimately I think it will be paid by ratepayers. There's a long history of utilities connecting 1/10 of a cent per kilowatt hour for waste disposal. If you inflation adjust that, you get to about 1/3 of a cent based on when it was passed. And if you give people a real solution to the nuclear waste problem, I think people will pay that. So 1/3 of a cent is about somewhere between 1/3 and 1/6 of a typical renewable energy premium. And this closes the loop in a way that makes fission look very renewable. So that's the first place you get paid a service fee. Then you get paid for recycled uranium and plutonium, and we expect to get paid whatever the current going rate per SWU is for nuclear fuel. So no premium, no nothing like that. And then there's other radioisotopes that we plan to separate. We've had some announcements about that. Nuclear waste is full of valuable stuff. And we're radiochemistry experts, so we expect to be able to separate and sell a wide range of those isotopes. And then finally, the electricity is not irrelevant. 10 to 20% additional revenue when your cost base is already kind of covered by these other applications is pretty meaningful. So at the end of the day, this gives you a TAM for waste recycling that's probably over $30 billion a year globally today. And growing, I think, as nuclear energy proliferates. That assumes no expansion of the nuclear energy generation base.
We have another question here on slide. Why not extract and sell the heat from Chrysalis? Is that an engineering challenge, or is it just not economical?
It's just not worth it. It's a megawatt of heat. Megawatt of heat is something like $1 million a year. And Chrysalis is a $500 million a year revenue potential facility. So putting systems in that complicate the product of isotope production is just not worth it. You don't get paid for it. But we're still getting to practice, right, the fusion. We're definitely going to measure the net energy output and track it and try to improve on it, frankly, over time. But it's hard to see Chrysalis getting to the point. And frankly, for isotope production, if we could go to 5 megawatts of heat output, we couldn't sell the radioisotopes. The market's not that big. So it's probably good where it's at. We probably won't recover electricity, even though you could as a demonstration, just for fun.
Another question here. I mean, have your investors shown any concerns of distraction and being stretched thin from the ultimate goal of producing energy? I guess you've articulated this stage pathway from the very beginning, but some of these stages have been so successful, perhaps they're seen as possible distraction.
Yeah, so now actually, I think as long as I'm the CEO of the company, there won't be a worry about this. And I mentioned how disciplined we are about which products we choose to go after. For example, we have tremendous access to the radioisotope and the radioligand therapy space. We see all the drugs that are being developed. Most people buy stuff from us. We could become a drug developer, right? And some people might argue that's a quick way to make money, but it would distract us from our ultimately end game, which is to absolutely build one of the most important companies in the world, which will completely change the way we make energy. So, but no, I think your point is exactly right on. We've been telling this story when people came in, and in fact, they're attracted to the fact that this commercial pathway may be the fastest path to commercial fusion. I'm not saying it may be the fastest technical path to, some fusion scientific goal, but I think our investors are attracted to this path as probably the fastest way to commercializing fusion energy and believe in that. And so, no, I haven't seen feedback from our investors that they're worried about distraction.
Ladies, gentlemen, thank you for listening. Great chat. Great to speak to you again. Thank you.
Thank you.